in exploring the theme of art and the green city in the sun, let me talk a little bit about the memory of landscape and stories from the source. Once upon a time, I followed a democratic river from its source. It is democratic because it shares itself through tributaries with a whole city. There are 4 main tributaries, you know. So I followed it in its name as the Motoine Ngong through the city that it had given birth to. I walked eastwards and watched its mood shift from bubbly hope, where 12 bird species sang and 2 elderly women browsed the underbrush for herbs, which they whispered to me flower only after every 5 years. I followed the river into sudden plastic-choked unhappiness, a pool filled with broken and hard things. The only bird there was a cooing pigeon. I did rejoice a little when downstream it had shrugged off the garbage and acquired a fresh, clear robe where small fish and tadpoles could dream of life. That was the best moment it would know for a long, long time, because after that, even though it tried its very best, it remained black, thick, and almost dead. I waited with it on the grounds of the yacht club and listened to the hyacinths speak to the waters. And when the river resurfaced at the overflow, it was clean again, but smelly. It meandered all the way to the industrial area. There, I met a man whose stories were born and built around this river's life, who told me that I would see that some of the ways that money is made in this city is through the pouring of poison into water, and nobody asks, nobody tells. When the bubbly river has become sewage, it does flee into the arms of the Athi, which cleanses its soul and dilutes our collective sins. Imagine this. Okay. I've got a story for you. I heard this 3 weeks ago. Did you know that there is a bird that every year, as with many birds, just as winter starts in Europe, packs its little bags and migrates to Nairobi? What is most fascinating about this bird is that before it leaves Europe, it lays its eggs. The date of departure is a few weeks away from when the fledglings should hatch. But when the seasons turn, it is time to leave, and leave the parents do. And when the fledglings hatch, and then the fledglings hatch, and guess what? 2 to 3 weeks later, the fledglings are on their way to Nairobi too. They fly across miles they have never seen into territories that are new. They fly all the way to Ngare, Nairobi, and wonder of wonders, find their mummies and daddies waiting for them. How do they do it? What are these birds? Shouldn't we have a city holiday to celebrate the arrival of the fledglings? Why do they come to Nairobi? There are stories everywhere. Green is not a separate idea. It is a story too. Green is the life of the city and its layers of lives. It's a consciousness of where and what and how and why and who. There are stories everywhere. It is in a name, Ngare, Nairobi, the place of still waters, the place of cool waters. It's an implication of constancy, presence, and reliability, of sanctuary, the place to which distressed creatures and humans come when the heat and fire which had consumed everything. Ngare, Nairobi has never changed its soul, has it? The story is in a byline, Green City in the Sun, the character of a prophetic city. Nairobi was green before green became the fashionable thing to be. Embedded in the city council's coat of arms, green, yellow, the heart and soul, the circle with the blue squiggles that is the Nairobi River, the waters that are the source of this city. Stories are in our boasts and myths. Nairobi is still a green city. True, most of the green is inaccessible and best seen from the air as you look into people's gardens and the Belgian and Canadian embassy. It is the city with the best climate in the world. It's the only city that when you come from the airport at dawn, you may have to stop for 3 giraffes crossing the road on their way to or from the national park. It is in the dreams of eco-architect Alfred Omenya, who said to me the other day, I hope he does not kill me for this, I need a table that I can hug and shout, how beautiful you are. I need a Nairobi restaurant that is designed to allow me to cry in peace and unjudged because my best friend has just died. I want to say I live in a Nairobi house that makes me happy. The story of Nairobi is in the architecture and design of the Nairobi servant quarter. Why do we go out of our way to make the servant quarter look so bad? What does Umbwakali mean? Is it only in Nairobi that we have signs next to trees that say, Usikojoe hapa? What is the story? There are stories of absences and loss. Like no longer knowing or caring that you do not know the name of the cow whose meat you ate at lunch. It's the loss of connection to the profound interspecies connections which distinguished our cultures from all others in the world. So now we do not even blink when our unique biological heritage, that was the Northern Migration Corridor, was hived off for elaborate construction schemes in the hands of the extremely well-connected but completely detached. There are stories in less obvious places, in the soil layers and rocks, the ghost of trees that were the Kibera rainforest in the place now known as Kibera. It is in the memories of the old and the daily ordinary encounters. Listen. It is in the cacophony of cars and birds and voices. It is here in the hopes you also have. The green and the city is right here. It has to be. The city is an ecosystem, and we are in and of that ecosystem. If we're talking green, beyond trendiness, is it perhaps an attempt to recover a language we once knew, but in between striving and trying to become something else, we got lost? And if that was so, how else would we speak and tell Nairobi? How would we hear and translate the meaning of the shape of the Ngong Hills, the fidelity of the Bateleur Eagles, so that we do not sink under the weight of imported brown pebbles from Dubai, or even London-relevant steel glass buildings that in our climate are greenhouses in the hot season and fridges in winter. I see you all know what I'm talking about. But just to remind ourselves today, how can we relearn the language of the place in which we find ourselves? You have heard all this before. You probably know it better than I do. One way is through the life of art in its myriad manifestations. The purpose of deep art, its primary meaning is that of expressing, revealing, and in this, deepening the texture of life and recording the story of being in a moment of time and in a place. Who knows what the source of art is, but what we sense of it is something of spirit, emotion, the forces of life we neither understand nor control, but which move us and from which we can imagine the impossible and the probable. Whatever our choice of art in this city, our materials are taken from nature, are about nature, and we who are of nature express nature even when imagining cities. Another name for city, after all, is ecosystem. In art and expression, we reshape nature, and if we are wise, we do so with nature's permission, with humility and a deep capacity to listen. For an ecosystem is made of existence's drama, birth, life, romance, movement, suffering, creativity, God, and death. Let me tell you about this city, my Nairobi. I have tried to escape it. I have lived in many places and done creative things in even stranger spaces. I have left, but like an overgrown fledgling, I always come back. You see, when I'm not in Nairobi, I cannot feel the energy that feeds what I need. And if I do not return to fill the tank, so to say, my inner creativity dies. And then suddenly, to my own surprise, I can suddenly wake up and find that I'm on a Kenya Airways flight to Nairobi. This place is like a sickness. My architect friends here remind me that Nairobi is a convergent zone that provides what design people call boundary conditions. It is geographically this and morphologically as well. It is an epicenter that is a meeting place of ecological zones, savanna, rainforest, desert. It's a convergent zone, complete with different wildlife, cultures, insects, soils, peoples, nations, and at the epicenter of the epicenter is the CBD. Boundary conditions are immense realms of imagination, the forge of creativity, but also destruction. It is a cosmos that constantly renews itself and makes new proposals for the world. For example, Picasso stepping out into West Africa, encountering shapes, forms, and styles there, and returning to reinvigorate and explode notions of modern art. Not every city in its character and formation is this. We see something of the potency of the city in the energy of Kenya's global innovators in technology, arguably fed by Nairobi's zeitgeist. Speaking of which, this 21st century is supposedly the knowledge century. Creative economy and creative industries are buzzwords. Creativity is now a commodity of exchange and trade. It is from creativity that the imagination for innovation erupts, and the character of creativity is unique to a context. And a place of convergence like Nairobi is right now very, very strategic. But that is a whole other topic. But why bring art into the green of the city? For a very practical reason, frankly. It is necessary to the success and future of a place like this to return the Nairobi human being to the core of expression, not as a problem or a source of disorder or an object of design, but as an elemental part of the ecosystem that is the city. Not as a thing to be mistrusted and from whom all nature must be preserved, but as a reference for belonging. Let me leap forward. Let me speak a little bit in the last 6 minutes I have, which I can also ignore. I will speak a little bit more of an aspect of art in the city and a project in which I'm involved with a few mad but beautiful Nairobi friends. The project assumes a couple of things. That our activities are part of nature. We're not capable of being anything else. Cities are expressions of nature. It's the work of animals. We just make bigger nests than others. We are doing wonderful things, but city creatures, great and small, are also doing splendid things. We are special, but it's no excuse to be blind to the specialness of the nature of which we are a part. The project assumes a quest. What is the language of the city? What are its memories of itself, and where are they to be found? How can we imagine the city beyond what we think a city to be? Way beyond those horrible Greater Nairobi pictures. I tried to find one to paste on the screen to remind you of it, but I was overcome by nausea. You know the ones I'm talking about, the massive web of multi-story highways of the kind that Japan has, tall skyscrapers imported from Dubai and Singapore, speedy cars that are made in Japan, a bullet train like the one China has launched, malls as you find in New York. I think you get my drift. How do we belong to Nairobi organically with an imagination for design and living that is derived from experience, reality, history of the place and its many dimensions? We wondered what would happen if in the hearts, mind, soul, and imagination of all the citizens of Nairobi, all who find themselves in Nairobi, there was a question to which they could write to, speak to, sing to daily. What if? What if the reclamation of green started with the restoration of the green city in the minds and hearts of its human beings? The convergence of experiences on a daily basis, the reclamation hopes for belonging, and belonging is possible with love, isn't it? How could we all fall in love with Nairobi again? In the quest, a simple question emerged strong. Something that we can ask of each one every day. What was your experience of Nairobi today? What was your Nairobi today? We wondered how else we could concentrate some of the creative energy and narratives of this city, which have already started in physical spaces like the Sarakasi Dome and the Go Down Arts Center. Ngare, derived from Ngare, Nairobi, the place of cool waters. The project is inspired by Nairobi stories like the day the cows came to town in the middle of the drought, or the tale we heard from a man called Kiraethi who used to run through swamps as a letter carrier to the new city residents. He's 80 years old now, but he's worried about the one letter he did not deliver, and he has kept it for over 50 years. Do we suspend time while I figure this out? Ngare is story sourcing from the city, which would be structured as a grid where daily city interactions and connections are sent to us, expressed as stories, text, song, image, prayer, poetry, through email or SMS to a website. And through the accumulation of tales, building the memory of a place up whether it's a tree, or whether it's a building, or whether it's a street. It's record building for the generations to come. The stories are meant to be used by anyone. We intend to use the stories ourselves, an animated feature, a film, a documentary, for example. Sourcing stories, stories that are the landscape speaking back with and through its people. In time, the grids will reveal the layers of inner and outer landscapes, us, the story of us while we were here, transitory creatures in a beautiful convergence zone city. We want to create a memory of landscape. We wanted to create a digital mirror of the Nairobi ecosystem, and we are attempting an ecosystem approach to Nairobi stories. And frankly, that's all I had to say to you.